All right, we are live. Hey, everyone, coming on live today to talk about a subject that is obviously near and dear to my heart because I'm a mom, and that is motherhood at all ages, all stages and phases, and how we can support ourselves so we are stronger mentally, physically, financially, and we really have that capacity, right? That capacity to not only take care of our family, but to go out in the communities and do what we want to make an impact in the world. So if you are coming on live, just put live in the comments. If you're catching it on the replay, put replay. And please put any comments, questions as we kind of start this discussion with my guest in the comments so we can have a real conversation about this. So my guest today is Jen Morris. And hey, Jen.
Hi.
We met in an online business training course, and I love how we met and what we're doing in there because it's really empowering and supporting other women in growing personally and professionally. And when I saw your testimonial, Jen, on your Facebook page, I thought, gosh, I have to have Jen come on and share her story because I think so many women can resonate with it, right? And before we kind of get down and dirty with your details and let you share, let me just kind of quickly introduce Jen. She is a mom of two daughters, a 5-year-old starting kindergarten next week. And she has a 2020 Labor Day pandemic toddler who's turning 2 next month. I love how she put that. She's an actor who's appeared in many commercials and musicals around the country. And she's also a certified health coach and mental wellness advocate. She has nearly 15 years of nutrition coaching experience, and she especially loves to support other moms of all ages, all stages, kind of what I said in the introduction, so we can prioritize our mental health, our physical health, financial, and kind of go out and do the things that we want to do and feel our best, right? And first of all, before I let you take it away, Jen, I want for all our moms out there listening, whether it's on the replay or live with us, to pat yourself on the back, like right now, pat yourself on the back, because it's not an easy job. And so often women, and especially moms, our brains are hardwired to serve others, right? Serve others first. And often we are putting our self-care, our health and mental health on the back burner. And then we're showing up depleted, exhausted, emotionally drained, burnt out. So there's nothing left in the tank for ourselves and often our partners, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So with that being said, as I know that was a long introduction, Jen, you had kids later in life. So you're in your 40s and you have 2 young kids. And when you say an older mom, I want to say that very lightly, right?
Yes. Yes.
You're not old.
Yeah, I'm 41. I turned 41 last month. So yeah, no, I don't like, it's funny. I remember when I turned 40 last year, it was a little not like, oh, I'm 40 now and that's old. It was just, I clearly remember, when my mom turned 40, I was 10. We're exactly 30 years apart. And, I just remember like my dad had a surprise party for her and we were allowed to come down for the surprise. And then the kids had to like go upstairs. And I remember being really like annoyed about that. And it's like a very vivid childhood memory. My mom's 40th. So I'm like, how is it my turn now? Like, where did the 30 years go? So it's crazy. Time goes fast. But yeah, I think, motherhood has evolved a lot. My mom got married when she was 21, but didn't have kids because my dad had a really crazy career in broadcast journalism. So they moved around a lot and he had just crazy hours. So and she was working too. So they chose to not have a family until she was 27, which back then in the 70s, people were like, is something wrong? And she's like, no, like can't afford and like don't have the bandwidth. And so, you know, she was sort of like a bit of this like early adapter of that generation that started to, you know, kind of say like, well, I want a life too. And I want a career. I want to make sure I'm in a good financial, you know, place before I have kids, and kind of pushing against that expectation that you get married and have kids like the next day. And so that, you know, I think in some ways, maybe that sort of shaped me but also I just, you know, I didn't meet my husband until I was, you know, my mid 30s. So there wasn't the right partner for me for a long time. But I do remember going, let's see, I'm trying to think when Neve is 5 and I got pregnant. Like, I think I had just turned 35 and got pregnant shortly thereafter. And I remember going into, and that's like the cutoff for like geriatric pregnancy. And I remember going into the midwife for the first time and filling out all the paperwork. And I see this note, you know, on it that says like geriatric pregnancy. And I literally said to the midwife when I went into the office, I was like, what the, like, and she's laughing because she was pregnant too. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant with my 5th and I'm like 45. She goes, I hate that. Like, they can't, it's such a like AMA kind of, you know. And so anyway, I just remember it being like kind of bombarded with it right away. But now I feel like very much, at least in my circle, like of the norm of like, you know, like this is just the age. And so, but I think it does present, you know, and I feel like what I talked about as far as the hormonal piece, you know, and what I talked about, let me close that little Facebook tab so we're not getting the dings, is this idea that when you do wait to have kids a little bit longer, you're like kind of going through this weird like postpartum perimenopause kind of thing, like almost right around the same time. There's just this hormone like craziness that's happening. And that I think was really happening a lot with me. There's so much focus on the prenatal and fertility, and there's not a lot of conversation around what happens after you give birth, you know, in those first couple of weeks and months and then years following, because it's not just something where you're postpartum for a minute, you're postpartum the rest of your life if you've had a child through pregnancy. So.
You bring up a really interesting point, Jen, because so much of the focus is on baby health, you know, how's the baby doing, and not like I had babies a little bit later too, like 32 and 35.
Okay.
And they're not talking about mom's hormones. They're not talking about what's going on with mom. They're always, you know, they're focusing on the baby. So that's really interesting. And our hormones are all over the place, pregnancy, during pregnancy, and post. So it's all the phases. And it just keeps going from there. Right.
That's
and
a party.
If we don't get them back into balance, we are left with what we're dealing with. Right. So share some of the experiences that you know, of how you were feeling. And
well, I had my first 5.5 years ago, 2017. And I actually, you know, that time I had a pretty good pregnancy. I had, you know, a lot of nausea and stuff. You know, the whole morning sickness thing always made me laugh because it was like all day sickness. You know, I was taking really high quality, you know, prenatals. I was eating really well. I was following my intuition. Like the first one, I was really felt horrible. I ate just whatever I could sort of keep down, which sometimes was French fries, and that just is what it was. But then once I started feeling better, you know, I was putting a lot of good food in my body. I had some like sciatica stuff in my 3rd trimester, but otherwise, you know, just felt like I had a pretty good, healthy pregnancy, and I was grateful for that. And I remember like waking up shortly after I came home from the hospital and just like being like covered, like just my sheets were just covered in water. And I was like, what happened? And I'm like Googling in the middle of the night. I don't know how moms survive without like Google and streaming services and stuff like when they had babies prior. And you know, apparently it was like kind of a thing that could happen if you'd had IV fluids and stuff like that. It was just like, you know, these like sweats, but mine just kind of kept going. And I just feel like for weeks and months after, it was just these like insane night sweats that wake me up. I'd have to change. I'd have to put a towel down because my husband would be asleep next to me. So I couldn't like change the sheets. So I'd put a towel down and I'd change my clothes. And I was just like, what is this? And at that point I was 36, you know, so I wasn't really, you know, but it was just, and then I had what I now can really point back to knowing, I definitely had like postpartum rage, which is, there's a lot more coming out about that. It really wasn't, postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression. To be clear, I was never like diagnosed. But I just had lots of feelings of overwhelm, frustration, anger. And I knew, because I was like, this is not how, and things upset me. I can get fiery for sure. I lived in New York City for 9 years. So like I'm always someone who's been, who's fiery and has strong feelings on things, but this was like a different level. It was a lot of like clenching my teeth and constant tension. And I knew it just wasn't like my norm. But I felt like I was doing everything right, And so, and luckily kind of around that time, I was 9 months postpartum and still having some of this go on, is the time that, Amari kind of fell into my lap. And so it started to research the science behind it, and it made a lot of sense. And I was at that point kind of like, well, what I'm doing is not solving this piece of it. And I had the community, I had tons of friends, I had people bringing food over, I had, a supportive partner, like all the things that I'm like, why, like, all the things they tell you that you should have in your toolbox. Right. And so I started trying, I started on the fundamentals, and I'd say it was about a month. I started to kind of notice like, oh, I feel a little less like, like I can't even, just like a little less pissed off, maybe is the best way to say it. Yeah. And so that was kind of like a whole new chapter for me of just really digging into what happens to women when they are, pregnant. Your brain gray matter changes, your gut changes, your microbiome completely changes. Again, stuff they're not teaching you in prenatal classes.
No.
So
that whole mom brain thing is real, but it's typical, but it's not normal. Right.
Right. Yeah. Your brain really like rewired when you're pregnant so that you can meet the needs of the baby. But then there's also this really interesting article I encourage people to read that was in the Atlantic about maybe a month or two ago. And it's this idea of like mom brain is not a joke, and talking really about the toxic stress, that this idea that, as you sort of talked about early on, that we're so used to and conditioned to, I think too, historically, to put our needs last and make it about everybody else. And we do that whether we have kids or not. I think I've always kind of done that too, before I even had kids. But then you have kids, and it's this whole like mama bear instinct that kicks in too. Yeah. And our society just isn't equipped, sadly, to, like, other countries have a lot more support for new moms, and our country does not. And so that's a whole other, piece of the puzzle. But this idea of like, we always have, it's kind of become this joke of like, how many tabs do you have in your browser, and that's how many I have in my brain. But it's not funny. Because it does create this toxic stress that, of course, COVID and stuff exacerbated and everything too. So,
and we really have to do a better job of not normalizing that. Right. I went through the stress thing, and stress can be a real kind of invisible gas. Like we don't know how much, we can all say, yes, I'm stressed. Yes, I'm busy. Yes, I got a million things on my plate, but we don't know what that underlying stress is doing to our bodies and our brains.
Yeah. It's just like a constant simmer that continues to boil and boil, and eventually it's going to, boil over, and you don't always know when that's going to be. I mean, I remember my moment was like, I couldn't get a stroller opened. My daughter was like, I don't know, 12 weeks old maybe, and I just couldn't get the stroller open. And I was like so enraged and so upset and mad. And I just, can kind of look back and laugh now, but I vividly remember. I don't remember, you don't always remember a lot from when the babies are really tiny because you're so sleep deprived, but I very, very much remember that moment of like, had I had a baseball bat, I probably would have beat the stroller up with that baseball bat as my daughter's like sleeping in her bucket. Yeah. So yeah. I know. Yeah.
I think, if any moms are listening live or on the replay, put relate in the comments if you can relate to that, because I know we all have those moments where you're like going to rip the car seat out and throw it on the ground, and it's it's that stress
Yeah.
bubbling up and kind of these out of body moments, but it's really our body telling us something is off, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's important to talk about it because I think there's a fear of talking about it because people think I'm a bad mother or what, they're going to take my kids away or my partner is going to like wonder who the hell I am. And I was just saying before we started recording, I'm working on a new podcast with two friends of mine where we're really talking about a lot of this stuff and, really having to give myself permission to be really honest about it because, it's through sharing our stories that we can all connect and relate and find healing and growth and opportunity. I really believe that. But also because, none of us are alone. My experience is not unique, sadly, but many people think their experiences are unique because they're not hearing people talk about it. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why we're here today talking about
Yeah.
it. So,
Yeah.
so you got on these gut brain protocols, and
Mhm.
then you had your second child.
Yep. Then I had my second one, Labor Day 2020.
Yeah.
That was a whole other experience because the most of the entire pregnancy existed during the beginning of COVID. So it was just a whole other, different in all the ways. I was a couple years older, so I did have some physical things that, we never really got answers to, but it was just a very physical, your body's not your own, quite literally when you're pregnant. So you can be the healthiest person. There's a lot of shame around that too. I know I've had a lot of girlfriends who have been diagnosed with, oh my gosh, diabetes. I'm totally blanking on gestational diabetes. And there's a lot of shame because I think it's something they did wrong, but it really is just something that can happen and then goes away, and there's
Your
not.
body's hijacked.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I feel like sometimes being in nutrition, but I feel amazing. I'm having the best pregnancy. I didn't really enjoy my second pregnancy. I didn't feel good for most of it. And, I couldn't go anywhere. Or see people. And that's a huge part of my wellness, toolbox is seeing people. So, that happened. Night sweats started up again. And this time I think I was a little bit more like, this could just be how it is because, I'm doing the things I will say that the Amari like definitely helped. I think I had a better, I wouldn't say recovery, but I think it's hard to know because you know a little more what to expect your second time. So you're a little more prepared
Right.
that way. And I knew what I needed and how to ask for it and everything. I do feel like after those first few really hard weeks, I felt like I stabilized a little faster than I did the first time around. But yeah, the night sweats continued. My period came back. I'm still breastfeeding my second. With my first, I think I went almost a year before I got my period, which was awesome. And then my second, it was like 3 months. And I was like, what the hell? Like, come on, this is like supposed to be. And it came back with a vengeance and just really heavy, heavy, heavy bleeding and periods and cramps and symptoms and everything. So, I was kind of doing what I thought everything, but that was kind of the piece that was still really challenging. And, this new product Ignite came out and I was kind of like, we'll see, like, okay. Like, I believe obviously in the products, but I kind of thought, what can you really do for hormones and for being in your 40s and maybe in this, again, postpartum perimenopause kind of phase, I just wasn't really sure. So, and within a few weeks, my period came and was definitely lighter this time and faster. It was much faster. And, instead of having kind of 3 days of feeling exhausted leading up to it, it was like 1, and then it came and then it cleared up faster and left faster. And the night sweats, I've had maybe 1 in now a month and a half of regular use on the product.
Wow.
And I think it was 1 where we turned the AC up because it was cooler at night. And that was probably a mistake because it was still kind of hot. It was still like a very warm day. And I think I was just actually hot. So versus like a night sweat where it could be 50 degrees in your house and you still have them. This was kind of a different, maybe more actual physical inside temperature. But yeah, so I'm a believer. I'm like telling everyone about this. I also feel I have been a little bit in the bad habit lately of staying up a little too late sometimes because my girls have been sleeping better. And so I'm like, oh, well, no, I'll stay up late. But just needing some of that time to myself. I'm a little more predisposed to being a night owl. I think being an actor, And sometimes, you just want an hour to read a book or watch a show and just decompress by yourself. And that's important for moms to have. And when do you get that time? You get it after 9 o'clock, right? And so
Right.
I've been kind of in that, summer habit of like, oh, we don't have to be up crazy early. So I'm going to stay up, watch one more episode. And then being like, oh, why am I doing this? But feeling like really rested, and not that like, oh God, I need 8 cups of coffee,
Wow.
like feeling really, really extra rested and not feeling just, yeah. So it's been really,
Mhm.
really interesting. And I really encourage anybody who's resonating with any of these things to give it a try, because I have to say, I really wasn't sure what to expect. It being, someone who's been with the company for 5 years, knowing the products are always awesome, but I was a little like, just being at the phase I'm in, like, I don't know, like, is there really something that can really like help with all this stuff? But I'm a believer. It's been awesome.
Wow. Um, and interesting, Jen, you mentioned some of the other things other than the hot flashes and your cycle and all that. Because I'm past all that. And we're noticing like just feeling calmer. We're noticing that rested feeling,
Mm-hmm.
getting, just my sleep, which was already pretty good, has just upped a notch. Because I'm waking up almost, it doesn't matter what time I go to bed. I'm not like staying up till 2 in the morning,
Yeah.
but I'm kind of tend to be a little night owl as well. I'm just feeling rested, and
Yeah.
think of just that tool alone, what it can do for a mom, just to wake up feeling rested and
Yeah.
not starting out your day behind the 8 ball and feeling exhausted the minute you open
Exactly.
your eyes.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Or just like irritable from the moment you open your eyes, because,
Right?
and again, like that's, normal too. Not every day. I have my moments, many of them, we love our kids and everything, but like it's parenting at any age or stage is still a lot, whether your kids are home and they're little, whether they're moody teenagers, whether they're out of the house, you always love your kids. You always worry about your kids. You
Mhm.
know, I'm at the phase now where I'm like, I worry about my parents, because they're getting older and everything. And it's like this endless cycle of like, but there is a big difference of like when you wake up in that state of like,
Yeah.
worry and irritability, and you start the day by biting someone's head off. It's like, it's not a good way to start the day, versus when you feel like, yeah, rested and clear and able to uh kind of ground yourself and think before you
Yeah,
snap,
right.
kind of a thing. Yeah. Yeah.
It's really kind of feeling the way we kind of wanna feel, right? Feeling like
Yeah.
ourselves again. Um, it's interesting because I have 2 older kids. They're both kind of, I'm like an empty nester, and it's true, you don't stop worrying about them. But when the worry keeps you up at night, when the worry kind of takes over, that's when it's kind of,
Right.
it becomes debilitating, and I don't do that, and, um yeah, so let's just talk really briefly about this product. We have been talking about it in our group, and then we'll kind of wrap this up. It's a kind of a hormone balance normalizer, right? It's not going to
Hmm.
boost any hormone, so
Yeah.
it's an adaptogen,
Hmm.
ingredients that will look at your body's level and say, "Oh, you might be a little high in estrogen. Let's bring that down a little bit. You might be a little low in testosterone. Let's bring that up." And men and women both have these sex hormones, progesterone, we're talking estrogen and testosterone, and it's really kind of bringing them back into a more natural, more youthful, level, so we can feel like ourselves again, so we can
Yeah.
have less irritability, and just more of a balanced feeling.
Yeah. And the thing that I found really fascinating too, hearing and learning more about it from, Dr. Sean Talbot, the creator and formulator and everything, was this idea that with estrogen, there's a lot of fear around estrogen because, a lot of women have estrogen dominant forms of cancer in their family, or they personally
Mhm.
have, gone through that themselves. This idea of like, yeah, I don't want something that's going to mimic estrogen or boost estrogen. But what happens when you are going through, perimenopause and menopause is that your stores naturally drop, but also it's that your body can't access what's there and use what's there. So this actually helps you like use what you have
Yes.
in the way you need it. So So that's what I
Yes.
found really interesting. It's not making more, it's just like better utilizing what you have, which I
Yeah, I
thought was
heard him.
really cool.
Yeah, I heard him talk about that as well, Jen. And that's the beauty of doing this in a natural way,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
No synthetics. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I
And
love what
safe
we're
for,
doing here.
breastfeeding and, yeah, like all the things too that I,
Yeah.
that you always think, do you think about, and you have to think about, because you don't want to be putting junk in your body that could hurt you or kiddos.
Yeah. So, guys, if you have any questions for Jen or anything related to this conversation, put them in the chat box. We'll circle back and answer them. Jen, any departing words for our moms? Anything else that we didn't share?
Yeah, I think just, like we need to normalize asking for help. We need to normalize lots of tools in our toolbox. I always say, like, I have a therapist. My husband and I have a therapist.
Yeah,
We call it marriage maintenance. I have
love
the
it.
products that I take. We work with a trainer once a week. Like we have childcare help. I mean, I'm very fortunate and privileged to have all these things too, of course. But it's there's not one thing, but if like this idea of like the hormone stuff is really speaking to you, like then add it to your toolbox. Because if you're like, I'm not sleeping well, if you're not getting good sleep because you're waking up in a pool of sweat every single night, and that wakes you up, and then you have to change, and then you're awake, and then the wheels start turning, or you get your phone and then the light, like you're setting yourself up for a crappy day. And again, we normalize it. We normalize 8 cups of coffee. And listen, I love a good cup of coffee. I'm having mine too, but like I actually, like when I first started the product, I was like, I didn't really want it. It was really interesting. Like it just didn't even appeal to me, which is kind of a first for that. And so we just have to normalize, like we do all this research, and we have all these different things for our kids, and we make sure our kids eat a balanced diet, and our kids get exercise, and our kids limit screen time, and then we have none of those pieces in place for ourselves. And we have to set the example for our kids and show them that, like, mom needs a break, and to be okay and empowered to say that. Or that, hey, you know what? No, we're not getting you that new toy this month because mom needs this product for herself. And so that's not in the budget, but this is. And so, like, set that, have those conversations and create
Absolutely.
that new normal for yourself.
Love it. Love it. All right, guys, we're going to end on that. Thanks so much, Jen, for joining
Thanks for
us.
having me.
Yeah, once again, any questions, comments, put them in the chat box. If you want more info on this new hormone balancing product, put hormones in the chat box and we'll get that information to you. So thanks. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.